We have to prepare for a more angry world. How to prepare? Take the necessary action to create a fairer world. I see the need for a great reset. So people assume we are just going back to the good old world which we had, and everything will be normal again. This is, let's say, fiction. It will not happen.
There is only one way this pandemic is going to go. It's going to get worse and worse and worse.
The next crisis is already waiting for us around the corner, and it is the climate crisis.
You've prepared some videos that we're going to watch.
Yeah.
We like to call it, let them say it, not us.
Right.
Yeah. So they talk about a big change that's coming. And we've been talking about a big change that they're planning.
That's true.
So now we're going to put this, we're going to let them do the talking most of the time. And then we'll just show some videos, go through them, maybe connect some dots for people that's, it's missing.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll do a lot of, we'll watch a little bit and then we'll stop. We'll add some commentary and then we'll continue to let the videos speak for themselves, that type of thing. So, but in the meantime, stay up to date with everything iconic. Follow us on all of our social media. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. If you want to support us or to support us, go to theiconiclabel.com and purchase a hoodie, hat, or a t-shirt. You can also support us by go to patreon.com/theIconicPodcast and pick your level of support.
You can fund bigger projects such as our documentaries like Communist Version 1, Communist Version 2, the Sci Wars that we're working on currently, and all the future big projects like that. Also some monologues mixed in there.
Yes, absolutely. So with that, I think we're kind of ready to jump into the goodies, right?
Yeah, so you said there are some videos that I haven't seen. Or probably have, but it's been a while, and it's like, it's not as fresh. So we're going to go through them.
Yeah, so...
Let me know when you're ready so I can cue it up. Yeah.
Right, so we'll do some prefacing first. So this one should cover a lot of... most people will be familiar, or they should be familiar by now, with World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, and the Great Reset. There's a lot of content like this online. But figuring out where it all fits in the overall narrative. Right. And so that's, I think, our key value add. And so the World Economic Forum is an offshoot of the Roundtable Group organizations founded by Cecil Rhodes, the Cecil Rhodes-Milner Group, that gave us the Club of Rome, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, the Club of Rome, Budapest, and Madrid, the Bilderberg Group, Bohemian Grove, and all of those. And then those guys give rise to the League of Nations, the United Nations, the World Trade Organization, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the World Trade Organization, the World Health Organization, the United Nations. And so understanding that infrastructure, there's been multiple spin-off roundtable organizations or NGOs and CSOs that have come to prominence since that era. And we mentioned before that it was David Rockefeller, or the Rockefeller Foundation, or the Rockefeller Consortium, that took over the roundtable organizations. And so a lot of this obviously was backed by Rothschild money. And we see that they've, at this point, they've consolidated pretty much all of the industries of the world into just a handful of corporations that are now putting the flesh on the bones of this thing that they want to do, which is called the New World Order, the global government, the international monetary currency, or the one world currency, and then consolidating the world's health, consolidating the world's wealth under a single unified entity. And so that's a lot to say. It's a lot of content to follow, and so instead of talking about it all the time, it's important to show receipts for things. And so this is why I like showing a lot of videos. A lot of these videos will end up in either Sci Wars or Enemies of Civilization. And so, but it's good to go through the podcast because I think, once they see them later, it's like, oh yeah, I remember I saw those videos somewhere. I remember you guys showed me Klaus Schwab saying that he was going to do all this stuff, and Yuval Harari talking about they've hacked the human being and all of this kind of stuff. It makes it interesting. Yeah,
these are interesting. And then, so now I would say World Health Organization was the #1, most famous NGO. Looks like the WEF is taking over now that, we're kind of done with the whole health stuff, even though it might be coming back. But it seems like just overall, and internets and all that stuff, you can see people start pointing fingers. Usually like Klaus Schwab is the number one guy that pops on. He gets credit for the World Economic Forum too, which it's not too. I don't know if you have the videos showing. Yeah, so we'll go through all that stuff.
So we'll go through Ettore Gotti Tedeschi, who is the former Vatican Bank president. Who says that there was an old new world economic system that they needed to reset, and the problem with that was they wanted to reduce the population in third world countries, what they consider third world countries, but actually it started reducing the population in first world nations, of which they still needed the wealth and capital from them to finish setting up, putting the flesh on the bones of the world government, and so you needed a new reset, a new great reset, of which now you have Klaus Schwab spearheading that whole concept, right?
Yeah.
So people would know Klaus Schwab because of all the media attention that has surrounded the World Economic Forum and the stuff that other content creators they have graciously put out there for us. But yeah, it's good to kind of go through and see exactly, or at least have these guys say it in their own words.
Yeah, and then it's kind of like to some of the podcasts that we did before, part of the civilian was like, the destruction of the middle class and all that stuff too. If you pay attention to these videos, there's a clear target,
Yep.
Yeah, so like you said, they needed that middle class to be strong so they can use that money to build what they're doing. Now they no longer need it, so it has to go.
Yeah. And so as we'll see at the very end, there's Yuval Harari who says, before they would need the serf population or the peasant population, but with the fourth industrial revolution, according to Klaus Schwab, the idea of AI algorithms, robots, and 3D printing, that gets rid of that whole peasant class. Now, they don't even need you at the Starbucks. Yeah. They don't need you to serve groceries. They don't need you to pour the coffee.
Yeah.
All of these things will be automated for them in the future. And so now there was this idea, well, what are these people if they don't, if they're not removed from the population, they're going to be suffering from mass boredom. And so one of the proposals, he's like, what we should do is like, mass drug use and video games. Wow. Right? So basically plug people into the matrix is the idea.
It's funny. So and then to that you were saying, as I think we had some conversations before, it's like if everybody had access to like first class or private jet and all that stuff, then there's no like elite, you're no different. Everybody's royalty, so you do need that. That's why they needed the serf class. Somebody has to serve them, right? There's a certain lifestyle that they want to live by, and then there has to be somebody providing all those services.
Right.
But now you're saying they're like, we no longer need the serf class, because then we can have, I guess then from some of the other podcasts we talked about the different species, right? So then there you go, you have the robot or some kind of maybe mix of human and that, and then
the whole human hybrid type thing, right? So that was with CRISPR they're able to edit the human genome. And so getting to this idea of like we're not needed, or the peasant class is not needed, the whole idea was to weed out, as we'll see in some of these videos, where the population, the idea to get you to weed these people out was based on two preceding ideas. When it was eugenics, the other one was Malthusianism, right? So Malthusianism says that we're past the carrying capacity of the earth, right? We're eating up too much resources, we're living longer, we have infinite growth against a finite resource. And then the other one is eugenics.
It tells you which ones needs to go. Yeah,
exactly. And so with that, because that idea is going to be brought up by Ettore Gotti Tedeschi when he talks about the first reset. He's like, well, if we're following, and he calls them laws of nature. He goes, if we're following those laws of nature, then we've already reached this carrying capacity thing, and we need to do something about it. And so we came up with this idea of a great reset, right? The old one. And then, it started reducing the population in first world nations. We still need those people, and so we need to shift the focus to go back and hit the third world. And then we'll see, probably not in this podcast, we'll prepare for the next one, but the whole idea of, you don't go to poor countries to get rich, and then there's this systematic war.
We don't, they do.
100%. And so there was the idea of like, we need to go to like Africa essentially, and then mine all of the minerals and things like that out of the ground. But at the same time, we need to do something to that population to get them out of the way. And then we fragment that population so they never unite and fight against us. And then Yuval Harari comes around and says, well, we don't even need this idea of divide and conquer anymore. anymore, because even if they did all band together,
what they're going to do.
Yeah, what are they going to, technologically, what can they do? Nothing at this point, right? So you pass the precipice of a united people that if they band together, and then the elite band together with the resources that they have, who would win that type of conflict? And so that goes into our enemies of civilization type stuff, because it's so telling and it's so obvious that this is what they're doing. Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, again, out of the whole world, there's only one country that can fight back.
Right. Yeah.
You know, one country that has 400 million guns in households. You know, where it's not as easy. Like, again, some of the videos we'll see, you can see the police, the one that's supposed to protect and serve.
Right.
Who? Them. You know. It's kind of like
100%.
if you're watching Game of Thrones and stuff like that, when they have their guard around them, you know, they're supposed to be the peacekeepers and all that stuff, but then they just start killing the citizens, I guess, you know, you would call it, because they're protecting and serving them and their assets.
Right. So that protect and serve is not the public. That protected and serve is designated for somebody else, and so. We can kind of start through. So,
otherwise we're gonna just keep yapping about stuff.
So the first, because we've already shown the first one with the trailer.
The trailer. Yes, I opened with that one.
Yeah. So with that trailer was put out by I think Rebel News, and so it gives like a good, I guess, synopsis over the topic of the World Economic Forum. But if you remember Robert Malone, who does his, he's the one of the founders of the mRNA technology.
Yeah, he's the vaccinated anti-vaxxer.
Yeah. And so he had his epiphany moment when thinking about the reach and scope of the World Economic Forum, hearing about it for the first time. It's one of these cockamamie conspiracy theorist ideas. But then he mentions that when I start seeing it implemented, that's when it kind of made a switch in his mind. And then later on, we'll see how he calls it. You know, this is kind of like there's no good guys in this war. This is warfare. It's information warfare. It's media warfare. And then it's good to see like the switch that happens in an academic's mind when this stuff is presented to them.
Well, hopefully then these videos will make some switch in some of our viewers or whatever. You know, and just keep an open mind. Watch it. Again, it's not us saying, it's them saying it. So all we're doing is just bringing all the information to the table, and you as a rational person, which we trust that you are. Based on like all the data we have some mature audience. You make the decision. Yeah.
So let's cue up this next one. So this would be, Robert Malone talking about, his basically his awakening moments. So there we go. This is produced by Band Video, which is part of InfoWars.
Yeah.
The other thing for me has been the personal journey of coming to terms with what the World Economic Forum really represents. And I really resisted that. People initially were coming to me talking about the Great Reset. I was like, oh, this is crazy talk.
That sounds like a conspiracy theory.
It sure sounds like a conspiracy. Yeah.
Great Reset.
Yeah, but then it's all documented. And then you see it being deployed.
It's funny.
When you see it,
but
deployed,
it's all documented.
I think for most people that's kind of how it is, right? So it's like Great Reset stuff. Yeah, right. Klaus Schwab. It looks like this evil supervillain. It looks like he's kind of taking over everything.
It looks like my thumb a little bit. I don't know.
And so, what do you, if you've never been exposed to any of this type of information, it all is like fringe, right wing. There's a whole bunch. You sound like
Trudeau now. Stop it.
And so, which brings us to a whole bunch of other stuff. Because Justin Trudeau is there. It's Klaus Schwab's poster boy for the New World Order, and we'll see that Justin Trudeau he has great admiration for China and what China was able to do under the outbreak time, and how certain measures were able to be implemented in a timely manner, and he wish he had that type of authority.
I bet he also wishes he had the one that after, when the whole world went back to normal, but China was still... I don't want to talk about that again. We're going to get the video taken down again. So, if you haven't seen the videos, they're out there. Yeah.
So with that, we can move into a little bit of Klaus Schwab.
Yeah. Do you want to show that first video you showed me about the infiltrating the government?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because I don't think that one was showed yet.
Let's see here.
Since we already mentioned Trudeau and stuff.
Yeah, let me expand this real quick so I can read all these tags.
Yeah.
So this is before we get to this will be Klaus Schwab explaining in English, because he speaks German primarily, his network before we talk about how they've infiltrated all the cabinet. So go ahead and cue this one up. Let me make it full screen.
We have, if I look at our stakeholders, we have business, of course, as a very important audience, and we have politics. We have continuous partnerships with many governments around the world. And of course, we have NGOs, we have trade unions, we have all those different parts.
Media, of course.
Media, of course, and very important
Media,
experts and scientists and academia.
Wow.
Because if we are looking at the future, I think we should look at new solutions, and the new solutions will be very much driven by technological developments.
And we even have, you even have religious leaders, right?
We have religious leaders, we have social entrepreneurs, very important social entrepreneurs.
And you see this, it's good to let these guys say it in their own words.
And religious leaders and social entrepreneurs.
So now,
of course, media.
Right, of course, media, right? So what we'll see is that everything is going to, under the World Economic Forum, all of these ideas are being consolidated. And so this is the think tank behind, the idea of BlackRock, Blackstone, Vanguard, StateStreet, what is it, Berkshire, Hathaway.
Hathaway, not Hathaway,
Yeah, so how all of those guys are being used to consolidate all the resources, all the wealth, all the media, all the industries together into one cohesive, centralized location. Yeah. And then this is the brainchild, or organizations like the World Economic Forum are the brainchild. So you still have the Club of Rome, Budapest, and Madrid. You still have the Royal Institute of International Affairs. You still have the CFR. You still have the Trilateral Commission, Bilderberg Group, Bohemian Grove. And so now, if one of these is taking center stage, that lets you know that they're one of the least powerful. Remember, the rings within rings within rings of power.
Yeah,
right?
if they're in public and you can do research about them, if there's going to be information available, they're
right. So
they can go.
So now we can see that here's Klaus Schwab boasting about how they've infiltrated or penetrated, as he says, different cabinets. Speaking about it's going to be Germany, or with Angela Merkel, she's the former prime minister there, and it's Justin Trudeau in Canada.
I mean, in this previous one, he kind of already said that we have NGOs, we have media, we have all that, but this one will be a little bit more direct, him saying that, right?
There you go. Let's go ahead and cue this up.
What we are very proud of now is the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina, and so on, that we penetrate the cabinets. So yesterday I was at a reception for Prime Minister Trudeau, and I know that half of this cabinet, or even more half of this cabinet, are for our actually young global leaders of the World Economic Forum.
So
half,
right?
I mean, now we have. Sorry, I cut you off. But now, not only that, because he mentioned Brazil or something, we have Zelensky too, another young global leader of a certain country that I don't know if we can say it, but
So you also have Vladimir Putin.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Also, the retard that's over my country. I don't even remember his name. But
and then people forget Pete Buttigieg, who's our current
transportation
secretary, and then also Gavin Newsom.
No, not Gavin. He wouldn't do that.
So when you start looking at the who's list, now it used to be like this you could get a list like this for the Council on Foreign Relations.
Yeah.
And so people, who's the Council on Foreign Relations? What is that? What do they do? Right. So, and back in, I guess the 90s and early 2000s, it was all about that. People that were into this data, look, these guys are, they can produce a who's list of who they have infiltrated in whatever government position all over the world.
Let me tell you what they do. Like Hillary said, And I don't have to drive too far for them to tell me what to do. That's what they do.
Yeah, I should have included that clip. We don't. It's good to be back. You know, like Dick Cheney says, it's good to be back at the Council on Foreign Relations. Yeah. And as Hillary said, now we don't have to go that far because they had created another office to be told what we should be doing. Yeah.
So in 2 words, that's what they do. Yeah, they tell these people what to do, pretty much. Yeah.
So now I'm going to rewind this a little bit. So now this guy on our right should be familiar. Do you know who this is?
No.
This is David Gergen, right? And so you'll notice who this guy is. Let me switch back. Let me switch over to another video.
Yeah.
Close this out. Because this will be familiar when you see this. This will be let me open this guy.
Oh, okay. Now I know who he is. Okay, let me make sure we're watching that.
Yeah. So this is David Gergen, and this is the interview that he did with Alex Jones, right? This was Alex Jones, as he would say. David Gergen would say that Alex Jones is doing like ambush journalism, right? So, but he asked him about an organization, right?
Let's go.
Criticizing you. Oh, what about Bohemian Grove? And then you countered them by saying, "Hey, I don't run around in the woods naked." What did that mean? Here is the before-mentioned Washington Times article where he said, "I didn't run around naked like they do."
I don't know what quote you're referring to. I'm not aware of any quote like that. Listen, I am a happy member of the Bohemian Grove. I like the folks who come there.
Happy member.
It's really inappropriate for me to talk about the group beyond that. Thank you.
Have you been there for the ceremony with the cremation of care?
Frankly, I don't think that's something I need to talk to you about.
It's so funny.
Yeah, these guys.
Yeah. Wow.
So there we have David Gergen.
I know now who he is, right?
Yeah, and so you'll regularly see him on CNN. Yeah, he's one of their main talking heads to explain, what all these speeches mean, what all these different business agreements between nations, what different treaties would mean, and he always seems to find himself in all of these situations that can basically explain to the common folk, the uneducated folk, what all this stuff means.
He's ill-explaining us.
Yeah, there you go. Right, and so now, that would lead into a former president, Richard Nixon. What Nixon has to say about the Bohemian Grove, and so
I want to say too. So maybe we'll talk about this in God King Father Friend podcast. But this was like a major turning point for me too, when it came to turning into religion type of stuff too. Seeing these people, the stuff that they do.
So seeing the elite of the world, you would think the higher up you are, the more successful you are.
The farther away you are from this fictional, and there's a book with the spaghetti monster on, and then these people believe it because they can't do it on their own, so they need some hope and all that stuff.
So they're using religion as a crux. But now you'll see at the highest levels, they're the most religious, and so and this kind of gets you into blood or child sacrifice and a whole bunch of stuff that we will have to cover way later.
It's kind of like part of that mystery religion too that we haven't really got into yet.
We have so much more videos to go through before we get there, right? So here is Nixon talking about Bohemian Grove.
Oh, I think I know which video this is.
As spring began to bloom in Washington, D.C., President Nixon took the time to have an impromptu conversation with 2 of his close aides.
Let's look at Northern California. You understand? Yeah. You know what's happened in San Francisco.
San Francisco is just gone.
It's clear over. I understand, but it isn't just down in the ratty part of town. But the upper class in San Francisco is that way. The Bohemian Grove that I attend from time to time. The Easterners and the others that come there. But it is the most faggy goddamn thing you will ever imagine in San Francisco crowd. It's just terrible.
It's nice to see that San Francisco hasn't changed in like 60 years.
Well, it's a different set of values.
So funny.
Sorry about that. But so now you have Nixon giving his his 2 cents on what's actually happening with Bohemian Grove. And so there's really good information that we can show from what actually happens at places like Bohemian Grove and all these secret social societies. Remember, because underpinning all the secret social societies are the secret societies. P2 Masonry, the Jesuits, and a whole bunch of other ones that we've already listed before in previous podcasts. But the next piece we wanted to show was the actual former Vatican president. We was talking about, if you're talking about Klaus Schwab and the Great Reset, here is Ettore Gotti Tedeschi's take on why they needed the first or the initial reset.
So he's the president of the Vatican Bank, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so let me go ahead and cue this one up. And so you'll have to read because...
Si chiama Nuovo Ordine Economico Mondiale. Fu concepito...
So for the people that are listening I'll read it for them. So it was conceived between the end of the 60s and the beginning of the 70s.
Anni 60, primi anni 70, colui che lo aveva...
He says its originator was Henry Kissinger at the very beginning. So now this stuff, Klaus Schwab is the founder. And so, he's the face, right? So now there's always the rings within rings, right?
Boroi lo presentò all'inizio fu Henry Kissinger. Era un reset vero e proprio.
It says it was a veritable reset. We are trying to correct the mistakes.
Stiamo cercando di rivedere
that we have been making for the last 50 years.
Errori che sono stati fatti negli ultimi 50 anni.
Since the very first reset, also known as New World Economic Order.
Il primo reset o nuovo ordine economico mondiale.
Which was designed in the 70s.
Che fu concepito negli anni 70. Fondato su una serie di...
And this was founded upon a series of facts which ignore natural law.
Fatti che ignorano leggi naturali, quindi...
Which we can define as not always natural and pretty utopian. Now he's referring to eugenics and the Malthusian problem.
Possiamo definire non sempre naturali e molto utopistici. Dopo 50 anni,
after 50 years since the first reset of the 70s,
questo reset fatto negli anni 70
produced several mistakes. A second reset is needed today.
Grazie agli errori che ha prodotto, oggi chiede un secondo reset.
The current reset, commonly called the Great Reset, is nothing but a correction
Il reset di oggi, quello di cui si parla, il Great Reset,
of the mistake we've been making for 50 years.
Aggiornata.
Exactly. Of the mistakes which we have been making over the last 50 years.
Degli errori fatti negli ultimi 50 anni. Quindi grazie, insomma.
So therefore, thanks to, or rather, taking advantage of,
Prendendo l'occasione di questa situazione incresciosa che si chiama
this unfortunate situation called the pandemic.
La pandemia di Covid ha la possibilità di accelerare.
There is the possibility to boost, or rather, I will use a strong expression.
E anche, se vogliamo, uso un'espressione forte di
to impose or cause to be imposed certain behaviors.
Imporre o far imporre determinati comportamenti.
Nevertheless, today's reset is the correction of the mistakes made by yesterday's reset.
Però il reset di oggi è la correzione degli errori fatti del reset di ieri.
First, a suggestion was made, that is, related to the Great Crisis.
Immaginata una proposta che è quella che ha provocato
we have been witnessing in recent decades. Now, what do you think this great crisis is? And you remember back in our civilian podcast where we covered this idea that they called the population growth in Europe. a crisis, right? It went from
26 million in France, they can't handle it and all that stuff. Yeah.
And so it produced a strain upon the food supply, the supply chain, all the same things that they say are happening
right now
today. Yeah. And so French Revolution, you're in the 1700s, right? So if it worked then, it's the same rhetoric is working now.
Yeah.
So
and it's because it's interesting. They were almost bankrupted while they were tinkering with American Revolution. So it's pretty much the same thing us doing, It's just like a tinkering in a world revolution.
So now we've switched roles. Now, what's bankrupt in the United States now, barring all this unnecessary money to send to, countries that are at war.
Yeah.
And, letting our infrastructure and our borders and all these, they did the exact same thing during those revolutionary times as they're doing now. And it's the same characters behind the scenes. This is a guy at the highest level here. Yeah.
It's funny. They'll talk about like common sense laws, but when it comes to do common sense stuff to make sure that your country is taken care of, all of a sudden the common sense is out of the window.
So we'll get to one of the video before the last where the former prime minister or I don't know if it's a prime minister. We'll see who he is exactly, but he describes exactly what they're doing. He calls it the New World Order, and he gives a great detail plan about how they're actually rolling out and finishing off with the depopulation agenda. And so let's let him finish.
La grande crisi che ci portiamo dietro negli ultimi decenni.
And so this great problem is too many births, right?
Troppe nascite, e conseguentemente.
And as a consequence, the need to decrease the birth rate of the population.
No wonder abortion is a health crisis.
Yeah. Think about it, right? So now this is coming from all these eugenicists, right? Who've always been about bringing down the carrying capacity of the earth, right? And so the spillage they see of the useless eaters or the human weeds, it's time for them to go. And so when they talk about decreasing the birth rate, he's going to next mention it was happening in an unfortunate place for them.
Wow. Yeah. Some of the elite were losing. I can say, okay, let's see.
La necessità di ridimensionare il tasso di crescita della popolazione. Qual è stato il primo effetto?
What was the very first effect of this process?
Vero, concreto, con cui si avvia questo processo.
The birth rate dropped, but where? In the Western world.
No.
Not there.
Quello delle nascite. Ma dove? Nell'Occidente.
The shrinking of the population took place mainly in the so-called Western world.
Il crollo della popolazione è stato nel cosiddetto mondo occidentale.
The United States and Europe. Why is the population growth rate supposed to be reduced?
Uniti d'Europa soprattutto. Che va ridotto il numero della popolazione perché?
Because according to a neo-Malthusian worldview, the more people are born,
in questa opinione neo-malthusiana ambientalista, più gente nasce, più gente consuma.
They consume, there you go.
The more people consume, the more people waste what nature provides for us.
Well, nature provides it for us. Okay.
Più gente spreca quello che la natura ci mette a disposizione.
Okay, that brings us to the end of that one. So now we have, we're starting to see that there's this, behind the scenes. There's always, as the saying goes, there's always a story behind the story that was told to you.
Yeah.
And so as we see,
kind of the motto of the Iconic podcast too, telling the iconic truth behind the historical fiction.
Right. And so we just let these guys tell it, right? Because he's going back. And he's saying, like, hey, you guys are hearing that it's Klaus Schwab and it's his book, The Great Reset, that we're following, right? And then Tedeschi's like, well, actually, it's
Kissinger.
right? And so, well, then, and these guys are offshoots of the Roundtable organizations, right? And so them and many other sub-organizations like them, that are the outer rings of the rings within rings and rings of power. Yeah.
And they were part of like the black nobility in Italy and all that stuff too. There's a whole history of them. I think it was Kissinger kidnapping a prime minister of Italy or something. I have to tinker it a little bit more. It's somewhere in there. I remember reading something about that, but it's not vivid. But okay.
And so now, what are they actually saying? What type of, because they're all set up as like advisory groups.
That's how it started.
To advise politicians. And as we've seen before, politicians are groomed here, kind of like Klaus has already said, the young world leaders or the young global leaders. Well, those guys are the new crops that then go, and then they're funded by these same corporations that are behind them. You have BlackRock, Blackstone, and Vanguard, who provide the money for the campaigns that get these guys elected, and there's this vicious cycle, right? So it doesn't matter if you're on the left or you're on the right, you're independent, you're green. None of
you're
that
playing
stuff.
Their game,
They already have that. It's their system, right? That's
it's like you said it too. So then we had, I think it was last year, the story was coming out, Vanguard, BlackRock buying neighborhoods of houses to always be rented. I don't want to jump the gun.
It's good. But a part of all of that stuff was when you hear the rhetoric of these slogans, build back better, stay home, stay strong, we're all in this together. Where do those things come from? Are all the companies getting together and it's like, hey guys, let's come up with a nice campaign?
Marketing, like the Nike swoosh, something that works.
So we'll see where all this stuff from, because the next piece of this is a Build Back Better montage where in the United States it was put forth as this is what Biden wants to do, right? So
that was he couldn't even say it in the beginning.
Build
a better back.
There you go. And then you get if it's Biden's campaign slogan, then why is it also Jacinda Ardern's in New Zealand, her campaign slogan? Why is it also Justin Trudeau's? Why is it also Mark Holmes? Why is it always Boris Johnson? So you go, wait a minute, all of these guys have the same?
Because the guy just said it. 50 years ago they made a mistake. Now they're doing it back better. They're building the reset better.
But in the United States, this was cast as what Trump was the one that kind of
antithesis.
So he took down a lot of things that I guess a lot of people felt that Americans held near and dear, and how dare he come into the office and kind of do what people think that he did. But these are two sides of the same coin, and so we'll get into a little bit, probably not in this podcast, but maybe the next one, where he there's the stuff that he was supposed to take care of while he was in office, and so people think that he's divorced from this stuff. He's not. Nobody gets in these positions because it's their positions that they're putting their people over. He said it too.
Klaus is doing a great job and all that stuff.
So let's take a look at what they actually are wanting to do. So now let's see everybody say it for themselves.
It's a very pertinent question to ask, how do we build back better?
To build back better or whatever.
We have a chance to reset the clock and build back better than before.
To build back better than before.
Wow.
Remember the terrible damage of COVID as we try to build back from this global pandemic.
Joe Biden calls it build back better.
Build back better.
Building back better.
To do things differently. To build back better.
We're going to build it back better.
And build it back better.
It's my plan to build back better.
Start taking all the problems that have been created in education and mental health.
The most influential doctor here.
To build back in a positive way.
I have launched a booklet called Build Back Better.
How original.
Written after coronavirus.
It's about building this country back better.
It is called The Great Reset.
An unprecedented opportunity
I
to
thought this guy's dead.
rethink and reset the ways in which we live.
The great opportunity for reset.
Build back better.
Wow, even the prince.
Building back better our economy.
Build back better.
All elements of the Great Reset are fundamental to building the future we need.
This pandemic has provided an opportunity for a reset.
It's a big...
wow, sorry.
Some would say to build back better. We would say to really have a great reset.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like one of those, like, leave some for us, you know, they just lay it all out like that. It's an opportunity to build back better.
Yeah, and so when we see that it's not on one level, you hear the rhetoric going out on conventional or mainstream media, and the whole point of having a mainstream media is to set a narrative in the minds of people and to get them thinking along those lines, and it kind of conditions people to think a certain way, so that when you present new data, or hey, this thing's not about what they've told you,
you already have something there. The initial exposure to that, right? That's kind of going to be your bias towards that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And from what they see is like these are trusted sources telling them this, right? So when they do, they go to Google and they do their searches, and this Build Back Better thing, what is that about? Google. So
Politico is going to say, something is this like a global agenda, false, right?
Politico, Reuters, name the magazine, name the
fact checkers and all that stuff.
All of it. So when you figure out that it's Vanguard at the very top, because Vanguard owns BlackRock, and then everything else has been consolidated under BlackRock, right? And so BlackRock is not only buying up all the neighborhoods, they've already bought up all the industries. So if it's Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, AstraZeneca, Pfizer, any BioNTech, any of them, they are all BlackRock companies. And as we'll see in a little bit how all this stuff works, where you have the agendas are set at the Roundtable organizations, and then now you have like a guy like Larry Fink, who's the CEO of BlackRock. He's also at the World Economic Forum.
No,
and when it's the Roundtable Groups that are saying we're going to come up with a new crisis to unite us, right? So that the first global revolution they talked about, they were going to use pollution, water shortages, and now they've moved on to climate change.
Yeah.
You would understand why CNN would then say the next thing for us is climate change, right? So
we're going to hate climate change. Then we have the Klaus Schwab saying it too, right? The next big thing is going to be climate change, climate crisis, or it's not the change anymore. They've upgraded to climate crisis.
Right? So now when you see this in the proper context, it's not a surprise when they all start coming together. Like when you watch, like we showed the montage of like the Sinclair report where they put in all this is extremely dangerous to our democracy, that thing, right? So, and then all the stuff in the holidays was around Amazon, right? And so now you can
Amazon is keeping safe their employees,
and so it's the same thing with these other months. So we'll go ahead and do a CNN and climate change montage. You remember this guy Charlie Chester, who Project Veritas caught him on in a candid moment explaining that the next thing for us is climate change, and then you see a whole rollout of the climate change agenda, because we mentioned way before, after they were going to do the pandemic lockdowns, then they're going to do the climate change lockdowns, and we'll start seeing that people are starting to slowly get diagnosed with climate change as a health condition all over the world.
We're going to say that too, right? Yeah. So maybe we should change our name instead of Iconic Podcast to Simpsons, because we're predicting stuff at this point.
We should start focusing mainly on climate like global warming, and so our next thing is going to be for climate change awareness.
Climate crisis, climate change.
Climate change.
Climate change.
Climate change.
Climate change.
Climate change. Climate change.
Climate change.
Climate change.
Climate change. Climate crisis.
Climate change. Climate change. Warming climate. Climate crisis.
Climate change. Climate change.
Climate change. Climate change.
Climate change.
Climate emergency. Climate change.
Climate change.
Climate change. Climate change.
Climate change.
Climate change.
Climate solution.
Climate change. Climate change. Climate crisis.
Climate change. Climate change.
The George Floyd moment for climate.
Climate change. Climate crisis.
Global warming.
Climate change is real. It's the climate crisis. Climate change.
Climate change.
Climate change.
Climate change. Climate change.
Climate change. Climate change.
Climate change. Climate change.
Climate change. Climate crisis.
Climate change.
Climate change.
Climate change.
The planet is on fire.
Do you think it's going to be just like a lot of like fear?
The whole planet is on fire?
Climate.
Yeah, fear sells.
There we go. And so, like clockwork,
I guess instead of if it bleeds, it bleeds. Now, if it burns, it bleeds.
Right. Yeah.
Remember, we were looking at some of these weather reports back from like 10, 20 years ago. Just like changing of a color. If you pay attention now, if you're watching any like weather channel right now, anything over like 90 degrees is like this hot red, orange. The whole map is like red and all that stuff. The surrounding area is blue, you know, so it just like contrasts that red popping.
See, if I knew you were going to say that, then I would have showed the one where they did the elevated terrorist alert, right? So they used to do this exact same thing. So they used to have the news stations would always have this.
The color.
So this color band, right? So like a legend that says like.
You know where I ended that from? American Dad. They had like he has one on his fridge. I didn't know that was real though.
They had that. So that was right after 9/11 where all the news started showing that, and so before that, they would only use that of like air quality, right? So green would be, it's nice. So then they switched over to, hey, we can tell you how afraid to be. And so they have this elevated alert system. And now it's moved into the weather.
Which is interesting because now we have New York and California getting nuclear preparedness alerts too, which again, maybe we'll talk about later. But you just said that. I just remembered the commercial from California. So funny.
It was a PSA, I think.
Something like that, for Ventura County.
Man.
Crazy.
Nonsense is what it is, right? So
maybe we'll on some other podcast we'll get into that. There's too much. What was the next thing you were showing?
The next one, so since things are being shifted over to more climate change awareness, now the World Economic Forum says, well, we want to give you capabilities to do that, and so here's a clip from the World Economic Forum about how they expect this to go.
We're developing, through technology, an ability for consumers to measure their own carbon footprint. What does that mean?
Good question.
Where
who cares? Nobody on earth wants to do this, and this guy's talking like this is like a new Apple product that everybody's going to go out and buy.
New and improved.
Like nobody wants this, but you see that he's pandering. He's like preaching to his choir, right? People.
Do you remember the social distance thing too? Track and trace. And there's still an option in my phone where you can go turn it on, and then even though apparently we're out of it and all that stuff.
Right. Let's hear what he has to say here.
Traveling. How are they traveling? What are they eating? What are they consuming on the platform? So, individual carbon footprint tracker. Stay tuned. We don't have it operational yet, but this is something that we're working on.
Can't wait.
Stay tuned. This is something that is not operational. Is this going to be a
subscription model, or is it one-time payment? Because I can't wait to buy one.
So if you think about, so they're making these like their consumer products, right? So when the World Economic Forum says you'll own nothing and you'll be happy, these aren't again suggestions. They're telling you what life is going to be like,
and you'll self-report.
Right, You'll have to self-report, just like in Australia they had to self-report, right? So they would get a phone call, they had to respond with the picture.
It was like some kind of emergency something. The idea was because you're high risk, you're going to get an alert at random times. And you have to be in your house and stuff like that too. So you have to send a picture within 15 minutes,
because
which
the
will
picture
send
has your metadata.
Geolocation, all that stuff too. If you don't do, then the cops show up.
There you go.
Because you're high risk. Because we will worry about you.
I mean, they're looking out for your safety.
Yes, of course.
So now we'll see that this stuff is they're consolidating, because the United Nations they're setting up the United Nations to be this global governance apparatus, and so it's the United Nations that they're trying to push all of this stuff under. So the World Health Organization is under the United Nations, and so remember we talked about the pandemic treaty where they want to get all the nations to sign on to the to give them basically this. They're an all-powerful entity when it comes to viral outbreaks.
I think that one is still live on YouTube. I'm not sure. If not, it's either on Rumble on YouTube. You can watch it. So it's the Director General of World Health Organizations saying that they need these 5 steps for all the nation states, which are the states that are under the World Health Organization, what they need in order to be better prepared for the next pandemic, which they're saying 100% is coming. I mean, they said it, Bill Gates said it, Klaus Schwab said it. So,
and remember, there's the St. Paul Acute Respiratory Syndrome that they've already did the training exercise for. That's called SPARS from 2025 to 2028. They've already done the monkeypox simulation, right before you started hearing all this stuff in the news about monkeypox outbreaks, right? And so, this kind of dovetails nice with what we were talking about previously with you'll be tracking your own carbon footprint. We'll get this next video has this partnership agreement that has happened between MasterCard and the United Nations, and let's see what they have to say.
MasterCard and the United Nations released a new credit card, setting a limit on what you buy based on your carbon footprint. Here to tell us more about what is behind this whole new credit card scheme is OAN's Scott Wheeler.
The economy has just teamed up with MasterCard and the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change to issue a credit card that monitors its holders' carbon footprint and cuts off spending when they decide you've used more than your share of fossil fuels.
Well, this new credit card, which has just come out now, it's a partnership between MasterCard and the United Nations Climate Fund. It's called Doconomy. And the idea is this is a credit card that it's all voluntary, of course. Everything starts voluntary. But the credit card monitors your carbon allowance, your CO2 budget on all of your purchases. And the most disturbing element to start out is, according to the World Economic Forum, is that it actually monitors and cuts off your spending when you hit your CO2 limit, or in their words, your
That's
carbon
the card I want.
max.
Yeah.
In other words,
is it tied to social credit score? No, not yet. It wouldn't have
paid your
that.
electric bill on it. You've already exceeded your thing. They're going to shut you down. And this is it's a new level of government monitoring for the climate.
Now, let me say something here. So it's not for the government, right? So that if that's as high as these people can see, that therein lies the problem, right? So because it's not the government, it would be, and it's not the World Economic Forum, right? So it would be the Roundtable Groups who have they're setting up this surrogate, entity for government. In one of our recent Instagram posts we put on there, we reread from where they talked about
in 94 Human Report Development Report 1994,
to where the recommendation was turn the United Nations into a world government and have all the organizations that they set up that support them take over the functions of government for this new world government apparatus that they set up. And so when you look at this one of the recommendations was an international tax, a graduated income tax, and that's straight out of Communist Manifesto, right? So, and when you read, as we read a little bit of this stuff before from Communist Manifesto, what they wanted to do was abolish nation states, because nation states are the hindrance to a global governance system. And so, and then using some of the soldiers or the military of each of the individual nations as the surrogate military force before there's this formalized United Nations force, which is the whole idea of NATO, right? So all of it's beautifully coming together, right? And so as people, there's the terms that are always used is like, you have to awaken people to these ideas. And so at this point, it's pretty much kind of,
wake up.
Yeah.
It's not a gradual. Yeah.
Right. So it's more like the people that, as this thing continues to progress, it gets more and more difficult to catch everybody up on how much they are behind. And
so if you don't wake up within the limit, you're going to be asleep forever, pretty much, right? It's going to be too late.
And then you'll be the serfdom population to begin with, and then, as Yuval Harari will say later, they will no longer need a serf population. They'll no longer need peasants. And so now, to do this human extinction thing, like in a humane way, they're going to give you the drugs and let you play video games until, now why are they sustaining you at all anymore, right? You're completely useless at that point, and you will be humanely eliminated.
You know what? Now it makes sense why Georgia Guidestones got destroyed. They need some updates. Going to come back 50,000 people.
Exactly. Yeah. Imagine the updates on that. So now that all of those stuff.
That was the old way of doing it. 500. What was it? 500 million, right?
Yeah.
That was
maintain the population. 500
so
million.
now they're like, okay, destroy these. We'll come up with maybe 3 to 5 million people. Whatever they're going to.
If that, right? So you look at why does Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum. Why is Trudeau set up as their poster child? So we'll hear a little bit from Trudeau himself to see what it is that they either like or don't like about Trudeau. And so here's Trudeau in his own words talking about how he admires the Chinese Communist Party.
Even with Sun TV watching for any slip, he was asked which country he most admired and referred to China.
There's a level of admiration I actually have for China because their basic dictatorship is allowing them to actually turn their economy around on a dime and say we need to go green as fastest. We need to start investing in solar. I mean, there is a flexibility that I know Stephen Harper must dream about of having a dictatorship that he could do everything he wanted that I find quite interesting.
Now, these people are sitting there clapping.
Basic dictatorship?
Yeah.
There's like basic, econom, and then there's like the pro dictatorship? What does it mean?
Yeah, so now think about it. So these people are sitting there clapping as if they don't even hear what he's saying, right? So
it's the same reaction to me when people are laughing at Yuri Bezmenov, just watching, it's like, what are you doing? They're laughing, these people are clapping.
Yeah. And what did Bezmenov say? They'll do it to themselves. Yeah. To our horror, right?
Yeah, to our horror.
Yeah. Crazy. And so now let's hear Justin talk a little bit more about privileged class. Now let me get the one before this because it's even better. So because this one should come next.
So white males.
Yeah.
Or middle classers.
Let's see here.
Let's see what we have.
There we go. So here's Trudeau giving a speech about the people that don't have the jab. It's a language akin to Jacinda Ardern, who says, we're trying to create two classes of people.
So you basically see this is going to be like, it's almost like, you probably don't see it like this, the two different classes of people. If you're vaccinated or if you're unvaccinated, you have all these rights. If you are vaccinated...
That is what it is. So, yep.
For people who are not vaccinated, lockdown rules will apply to everyone 16 and above. If you are not fully vaxxed, stay home. There are only 3 reasons to leave the home now, not 5. Work is not a reason to leave the home for the unvaccinated. The Chief Health Officer has also determined that restriction of movement is critical right now and that 1 hour of exercise for the next 4 days is not essential. Remember, these restrictions only apply to those who are not fully vaccinated.
So let's let Trudeau say it for himself.
For people who continue to hesitate or to choose not to get vaccinated, they are losing privileges to do certain things, whether it's get on a train or a plane, whether it's travel internationally, whether it's move forward in a job in the public service, or even have a job in the public service.
So now let's hear him say the clincher. Here you go.
Regardless of the fact that we are attacking your fundamental rights or limiting your fundamental rights, and the Charter says that wrong, we're still going to go ahead and do it. It's basically a loophole that allows a majority to override fundamental rights of a minority.
So, yeah.
It's funny that he thinks that he is the majority. That's one.
Yeah. So when you look at this stuff, so state constitutions, national constitutions, these are the foundations of nation states. Those have to go. Yeah. And there's plenty of good books, good quotes that we can show. Those are the targets, right? So, and because of those, along with industrial revolutions and advancement of technologies, you get this powerful middle class.
Yeah.
And with the powerful middle class, they rival the power collectively. They rival the power of the elites, and so you have to systematically, as Klaus Schwab would say, you need a fourth industrial revolution, right? You need to take that wealth, that power, out of the hands of the middle class, and now we'll see that there's been under this pandemic time. The greatest transfer of wealth from the middle class to the hands of the 1%, right? And represented in that 1% are corporations in like BlackRock, Vanguard, StateStreet, and Berkshire Hathaway. And so when you look at those guys are going to set the tone for what all the rest of the business world does, because before they didn't have that type of power, because they didn't have that type of control. They didn't have their teeth into this many corporations industry-wide, no matter what industry it is. If it's the medical industry, if it's the food industry, if it's the travel industry, if it's the raw material and manufacturing, if it's the banking industry, it's irrelevant because now they own all of it. And so now, as we'll get into another video shortly, we'll see how that actually breaks down. Those guys will produce, or the Roundtable Groups produce these policies.
Yeah.
The policies are then given to companies that want to do according to those policies and need regulations passed. The politicians then surface in whatever local government it is. And on the other side, if you want to continue to receive funding or you want regulations to go in your way, then you'll play ball. This is how this whole woke agenda, this is how they pass that whole idea down through the corporations. And while all the corporations are on the hook now to deliver according to those deliverables.
Yeah, so you'll have like the social pressure through, like, all this I don't even know what you call them, like, because there's so many names you start saying it, the leftist, let's say, and then, like you said, with the funding, when it comes to like private stuff and everything else too, and then all of a sudden you're like, if you, let's say, even hesitate, even then you'll be already marked by labels. They'll throw at you. If you're an individual, that's it. Your career is gone. If you're a company, your company is gone.
Right. And so they do the same thing with nation states that are either UN partners or non-member states of the United Nations. And so remember, this is a pincer tactic, right? And so it's happening to them too, not just to the public. It's happening to these corporations as well, because now they're being pressured by BlackRock, Blackstone, Vanguard, StateStreet to go along with these agendas to receive funds. And so imagine if, because you're a publicly traded company, you have shareholders, and so now you're responsible to the shareholders. And if a company that owns 28% or 18%, whatever. Well, they have a say now. So and they say, well, we're going to go in this direction, and otherwise I can tank these shares.
That's it.
Right. So and you have this type of power. You don't need to have 100% control.
Yeah.
You just need to have enough weight in enough industry. And so this is how you get like this ripple effect that can take place. They can affect like, the supply chain, the food and agriculture. We're in a food shortage, are we not? Right. So, and then one of the fun things to get into, not in this podcast, but later, is the weather modification aspect of it, because you'll have a lot of the guys that they're speaking at the Council on Foreign Relations talking about how great weather modification tools that they're currently using
China's been using it.
And so
I was going to say BlackRock pretty much has basic communism, the basic level. You don't need the full. You don't need to own the 100% of the company. So, you have enough where you can make some changes.
So think about BlackRock and these guys, Vanguard. The people that work there, that are there, those people are, so they're at a corporation, but they're part of other societies. So you can be a member of like the Council on Foreign Relations or the Club of Rome or the Bilderberg Group, and also be a part of the corporation. But then you can also be a Freemason or a Jesuit, right? So now here's where the secret societies start influence, the secret social societies that influence the small handful of corporations that can control all the corporations of Earth.
Rings within rings within rings.
With
the percent of a population control.
Or as in the God King Father Friend context, this is how if there's this antichrist system that's supposed to pop up on the timeline and is supposed to have totalitarian control over the entire world, where he causes everybody to receive a mark on their right hand or forehead, and you can't buy, sell, or trade unless you have the mark or the number of the beast, right? And so if you go against that system, then now you're going to be completely cut off. And so, well, how would who's documenting how that is supposed to happen? If you believe that that's an end goal, that is supposed to happen in a biblical sense, then how come nobody's paying attention to how it's being built? And this was the whole idea that we had. The God King Father Friend podcast was supposed to we trace that narrative, and with the civilian podcast, so people don't like that type of stuff, we'll trace the secular narrative. But they're like the double helix of the DNA, or there's too much connective tissue between the two. This is why separate them, you can follow specific threads, right?
Yeah.
So,
do you think it's too big of a stretch to say that Build Back Better, like lowercase b's, that's 3 b's that look like 666?
There's a lot of stuff like that. So, when you look at like numerology and gematria and things like that, how they do certain things on specific dates that correspond to specific letters of the alphabet that have specific numbers that are attached to those letters. And then, there's really good books that kind of detail all of that type of stuff. And it's fascinating when you go through and you figure that they're so, not only is the astrology aligned, the astrotheology is aligned, the numerology and the gematria, those things are all aligned. And, which societies are aligned with those things? Well, the Jesuits, the Masons. And so once you peel back all of these layers, you see that it's all interconnected, and it takes a long time to go through and because normally you wouldn't even pay attention to those type of things, right? So, and it takes so long to go through one specific thread of it that you think that, this is all that there is. Man, I reached the end of this rabbit hole only to discover this is the tip of the tip of the tip of the iceberg in relation to this stuff. And so,
what do we have next?
So next one is the World Economic Forum, talking about so people, when they get hip to this World Economic Forum stuff, people start calling out members of their own parliament saying, hey, I'm hearing that, Klaus Schwab has sent you a couple of these books and that you've been a keynote speaker at some of his events and you've traveled to Davos and you've done, and we'll see what the reaction is. Here's a good video to kind of highlight that.
I had a constituent that wanted me to ask a question about outside interference to our democracy. Klaus Schwab is the head of the World Economic Forum, and he bragged how his subversive WEF, World Economic Forum, has, quoted, infiltrated governments around the world. He said that his organization had penetrated more than half of Canada's cabinet. And I was wondering, in the interest of transparency, could the member please name which cabinet ministers are on board with the WEF's agenda? My concern is the deputy.
Order. I know the member was in a really good question there, but the audio was really bad and the video is really bad as well. And I apologize. I don't know if the member. Okay.
Yeah, sure. The audio and video was really bad. The question is too pertinent, right? So now. So imagine if you were to do something like this in Congress and be like, hey, how many of the congressmen here or the president's cabinet are members of either the World Economic Forum or the Council on Foreign Relations or the Royal Institute of International Affairs or the Club of Rome, Budapest, or Madrid, or the Bilderberg Group, or you just keep going, right? So
you know what's the fun thing? He said he had a good question, but I couldn't hear him.
Right. Yeah.
How do you know it was a good question?
Yeah. Obviously, right? So clearly it was, they just needed this guy to go away. So now we have other people that start to do this calling out.
What's up with all that green, though? Is that how they're... Well, that was ugly.
Yeah. So now... here we are in the United States.
Although I think you're a magnanimous indivial, but
good
you
audio.
and your corporation, McCormick, you are a part of the WEF, the World Economic Forum. You, as well as you, Oz, they're both part of the World Economic Forum. This is a very serious organization that has a mindset of pushing globalism and ESG, environmental, social governance.
Okay, thank you.
And we need to be mindful of that.
Thank you, Ms. Barnett. 15-second quick response, sir, Mr. McCormick.
Here's McCormick.
Well, listen, I've run two businesses, wildly successful businesses. I'm not going to apologize for my success. I have done business around the world. It makes me uniquely capable of understanding the global world that we live in. I've served in the military. I've served in combat. So I know how to deal with the challenges we face.
All right.
And just like President Trump, that experience is going to make me a better senator.
But that didn't have anything to do with the World Economic
Forum.
Forum.
Thank you. Let's continue on with Mr. Bard.
Yeah, so now imagine people just going to do this type of thing, like to run, knowing that they're not going to win, just so that they can bring awareness. So the interesting thing about it is there should be videos like this on all these different levels.
Every day they show up anywhere in public, they should be asked about this.
It's school boards as well, because remember, this the ESG right, and the Sustainable Development Goals, all of those things have to be implemented down to the smallest minute level.
And we talked about I think it was like monologue, what was it, in the monologue 3, the LGBTQ one.
Yeah.
You have the CIECAS, right, part of the UN, coming down to now in our schools teaching kids about masturbation.
Yeah.
Preschool kids.
Yes. Yeah. So we'll get into that because, for those, it's best to kind of show like, where this stuff, where it can be found, right? So imagine so we can open up like we did with the UN report, right? Here's where this stuff can be found. Here's what it's actually saying, and then if there's any good videos, let the people say it themselves, right? So there's one thing for us to be like, oh, they're doing this, and then they're doing this, and it's another like, here. Oh, and then it's not me saying, it's like you see it for yourself, and you have to recognize it for yourself. And so that kind of gets us to our next piece here, where this is understanding the ESGs, right? So we'll chat about this because this is
an interesting one.
Yeah, so this is a part of what the whole sustainable development stuff. These are United Nations mandated goals through the member states that signed on to be member states of the United Nations that are now having to follow these specific
regulations now.
Yeah. So now, and think about it. So once these regulations are suggested,
suggested,
so you get this idea like, oh no, these corporations are going to have to comply with these regulations for whatever reason, but the regulations are coming from the very companies that that are part of that wheel. So what you'll see is like BlackRock and Vanguard and these guys are a part of putting out these policies, these regulations to their own companies because they own majority share in all. So, and this brings up interesting thing with central banks later because, well, if BlackRock is the one that's putting out these type of policies for these corporations to kind of guidelines to go by, and if there's any investigation that needs to take place,
it would be them.
It would be them investigating themselves, right? So this was the whole problem with a lot of the 9/11 stuff.
I don't see any problem there. Yeah, no bias.
So imagine with the whole 9/11 stuff, people want we want a new inquiry into the 9/11 investigation because this 9/11 report is garbage, right? So and most people that report is garbage. So but who would you ask to go do it? So you would ask the criminals to investigate themselves to produce a report that tells you that they're criminals and that they did it. Right?
I mean, it's again, we saw our last video being taken down because it goes against World Health Organization, and we did question World Health Organization.
Right.
So if it goes against World Health Organization, your video won't be on the platform.
Right.
But we are asking questions about World Health Organization, so it's the same thing.
So now think about it. So now you have BlackRock owns Yahoo, they own Google, they own Twitter, Apple, Facebook, all of it, right? So, and we would say like, hey, an NGO is now being protected somehow by these platforms, right? So, but when you realize it's BlackRock and these guys that are a part of the Roundtable organizations that are trying to put out a specific narrative, if you're going to go on their platform and speak against them, of course they're gonna give you strikes and they're gonna censor your speech, right? Because now you're telling you're shedding light on their dirty laundry to the entire world. And then if you're getting mad at that aspect of it, it seems a little illogical or unreasonable because it's them, right? So now let's see what they have to say.
So I guess the only thing is we're gonna keep doing it until they fully just be like, you can't anymore.
Right? Just be straight up.
Vivek, can you walk us through what is ESG?
The short answer is it stands for environmental, social, and governance factors.
Environmental, social, and governance factors, right? So again, this is coming from the Roundtable Groups, and this is a part of the Sustainable Development stuff. That's the United Nations, and now because these companies are involved in bringing about this global governance idea, they're giving the power to the United Nations to be that global governing body. they're passing these things like ESGs that are part of the Sustainable Development Goals, and now the cycle gets complete. All the companies that they own, they're telling them to get in line with this company policy.
They just now you again self-regulate pretty much.
Right. Yeah. And so now not only are they going to self-regulate, but they're going to self-promote within. Right. So now this is the whole idea of setting up all of these bodies of unelected unelected officials is to circumvent this idea of constitutional governments, right? So either state constitutions or federal constitutions, you can bypass both of those.
I mean, we just heard Trudeau say it.
Yeah,
pretty much. There's a loophole. Yeah, and we're gonna use that.
Though we're attacking your rights, we understand, right? So because the whole concept is going away, right? So and there's going to be world or global citizens. So let's let this guy explain.
That are supposed to influence how capital is invested in the economy. What's basically happening is a small group of asset managers who pledge allegiance to this philosophy.
Who are the small group of asset managers? BlackRock, Blackstone, Vanguard, StateStreet.
Very small group. Just maybe combined of $50 trillion.
He'll say it, watch.
ESG. Firms like BlackRock, StateStreet, Vanguard, three of the largest asset managers in the world right there, together managing over $20 trillion. That's more than the GDP of the United States. What they do is they aggregate the money of everyday citizens. They invest in companies across corporate America and tell those companies that you have to abide by these climate goals, that you have to abide by these emissions caps, that you have to abide by these diversity, equity, inclusion standards.
That's your LGBTQ, right? All of that stuff.
Yeah, the equity and all that stuff.
Yeah. Let's let me finish.
Racial quota systems in your boardrooms. And if you don't, then we're going to fire you as CEO. Then we're going to take seats on your board.
Now, you remember there was a whole bunch of CEOs that
200 something.
Yeah. And why do you think those guys stood down?
Because I think what happened was they maxed out their credit card on their carbon
carbon footprint.
Yeah, so they couldn't use it anymore.
So their cards get declined. They got to step down. So now these are and you've noticed that there hasn't been much media attention on those characters, right? So like, wait a minute, you're the head of this corporation, and you just stepped down. And so now one idea is that these characters they were aware of what was going to be done, and they didn't want to be the idiot, the patsy that all of this stuff,
because they're going to make example out of some people, right? Yeah, so if you're Jeff Bezos, you don't want to be the one CEO of Amazon being like, oh yeah, now I gotta get fired because
so now imagine, so now if you know that, like, okay, BlackRock says, hey, this is what we're doing, everybody's going to get on board, right? So the smart people were probably like, you're setting up a whole bunch of patsies for this thing. When it goes belly up, you're going to blame it on them, as Bezmenov says, right? So
I think this is built for them.
And so they would say, like, I know this is not being built for me. And so I'm going to take what I can get up and get out while I can, right? So now you have that huge bailout, or not bailout, these guys just leave all of these positions, right? This mass exodus.
So what do you think? I mean, maybe we'll talk about this later, but now we have these prime ministers getting all of a sudden, just randomly, newly re-elected prime ministers being like, oh, we're out. It's interesting what's going to happen there, right?
And so now we're starting to see this new wave of revolutionary things, Sri Lanka, right? So, and then the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank starting to do that, the economic hitman type ideas.
I mean, in all these Dutch countries with the farmers and all that stuff too going out,
and so some countries not able to get fertilizer. Right, and so
China not being able to withdraw their money, so the tanks are protecting banks.
I mean, all of this, none of this stuff is happenstance. It's all contrived. It's and one of the things that Elon Musk has always warned about, even though Elon Musk is a part of all of this stuff, is the power of AI. And so once we'll see a little bit of this in another video that's coming up about how because BlackRock uses Aladdin, which is basically a risk management software that is going to look at all these different variables and kind of give you a really high percentage of outcome for what the market is going to do, right?
Because think about $20 trillion that they do, and we're the customers. They have data on us. That's our data that for the past like 10, 20, 30 years, they know what we spend, our habits, where we go, and all that stuff. So
One of the ways BlackRock controls the world so well is through its control of the media. Together with Vanguard, an investment company they also partly own, BlackRock now controls 18% of Fox, 16% of CBS, 13% of Comcast, who themselves own NBC, MSNBC, CNBC, and Sky, and they even own 12% of Disney. This is very important because it means that for any of these companies to decide on company policy, they must now also consult with BlackRock before doing so. And it's just the same with big tech. BlackRock is now the biggest institutional investor in Google, Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, and so many more. I mean, the list of their investments in companies is just endless. And by extending its reach in such a dramatic way, BlackRock now has control over more than 90% of the media, which might also be why you've never heard of them. Because controlling the media is a very important step for BlackRock to take over the world. If everyone knew the consequences of BlackRock owning over $9.5 trillion in assets, some questions might start to be raised. And you see, BlackRock's control isn't just extending through information in the media, but also through the entire world's economic and political data. And as I mentioned before, this is all done through Aladdin, where Aladdin accurately predicts the outcome of every single investment. But the question is, where does Aladdin get this information from? Well, that's where things become very jarring. You see, because of BlackRock's ownership of banks, insurance companies, social media giants, and even pension funds, Aladdin now possesses huge amounts of personal data on everyone. Everyone who has ever knowingly or unknowingly given BlackRock money. And with such a powerful tool under their arsenal, everyone now wants a piece of the pie. And by controlling this much data, BlackRock now controls governments, because BlackRock can use this data to sway companies and even government decisions. For example, BlackRock successfully lobbied to get a contract to manage the EU's regulation of banks. However, this backroom deal is now being investigated as BlackRock themselves own the banks they should be regulating. And this is just one of the many examples of these sorts of actions. A 2016 study in the Journal of Finance documented that investment companies like BlackRock show, quote, widespread behind-the-scenes intervention in the companies that they own stakes in. And this problem only gets worse as BlackRock owns stakes in nearly all major publicly traded companies. And now with our current recession, BlackRock is buying as much homes and real estate as possible, causing regular house prices to skyrocket. BlackRock profits when a society doesn't own their homes but rents, because BlackRock can squeeze even more money out of the economy through mortgaging off these artificially inflated homes.
Of course, the Aladdin can probably predict this stuff in point whatever 0.001% accuracy.
So Aladdin would then give you your report that says what the behavior is most likely going to be. It can measure what the market will and will not do. It can tell you imagine like if you're going to use this at the Army War College, it gives you all this data to where you can completely map out a real-time landscape of what's happening in the world and how small changes in different geographies would affect the entire world economy. And so
they can control the whole economy, right? We think the Fed is like, by raising some interest rates, cooling down, warming down, all that stuff, they'll do it on the next level.
So this is how the World Economic Forum can tell you, hey, this is our great reset. This is the
full control, pretty much.
And their name is the World Economic Forum, right? So everything is being tied. When you realize, Larry Fink, who is the CEO of Blackstone or BlackRock, how everything seems to be, for every corporation, it needs to be ran by BlackRock, right? And so, in essence, Vanguard. And we'll get into I think the next video talks about how what this guy is saying, how it actually rolls out. So let's let him finish.
Then we're going to cut your pay. And that's the lurking variable behind the woke capitalist epidemic, which is really the capital behind the scenes that's forcing companies through shareholder pressure to adopt these one-sided politicized agendas.
Yep. And so, and if you don't play ball, then BlackRock, Vanguard, these guys they'll pull your funds, right? So, or they'll tank your company. It's endless what they can do. So here's Glenn Beck kind of explaining it for, how America or everybody around the world went woke at the same time, because you have the small subset of corporations that own everything.
Because it didn't take that maybe 3 years.
So NFL is gay, NBA is gay,
NASCAR is gay.
Nestle. So
name anything.
So I think I put in what was it? A previous video. Kind of like a massive, kind of like a spreadsheet of logos and how, but not in the Middle East, right? Because you have a different issue going on in the Middle East, right? So, but let's let Beck explain this.
Here's how the formula actually works. the Fed prints as much money, and this is not just our Fed, this is central banks. The Fed just keeps printing money. Ever wonder why the stock market did so well when every business was closed? Yeah. So the Fed, which is the biggest banks in the country, they print as much money, and then they give that to Bank of America, Chase, Wells Fargo, Citi, and others, okay? And then they give that money to places like BlackRock, Blackstone, Vanguard, who are saying, you know, we only want to do business with companies that are woke.
Yeah, there it is.
So then they give that money either in stock or, you know, they just come in and take over the country. They take the money that they've been given by the banks, which were given that by themselves at the Fed. And then what happens? All of these companies, they're all awash. Their stocks are doing great. And the largest investors in the company are these guys. They hold enormous leverage over the country, over the companies, and they say,
or the country
like
too.
BlackRock, you know what? You're going to have to be a woke company. I mean, we have a lot of trust in you, but you'll be dangerous. You'll be dangerous. So investors put public pressure on, let's say, Apple.
So he goes and explain how it happens at Apple, right? So let's hop back here for a sec.
Oh, you want money, but you're not woke.
Yep.
Sleep companies don't get it. Sorry.
Yep. And so, you know, earlier we showed a clip with Robert Malone, right? So where he talks about, you know, well, his wake up moment with the Great Reset. And so, and then he does his speaking engagements, right? So it's him and McCullough who go talk about the mRNA technology.
Don't get too much into that. We need this video to get out.
So this one we may have to chop out and send to I don't know, Rumble or Odyssey or somewhere, right? So
if this part is missing, then it's because we had to take it out because YouTube said no.
Yeah. So, but here, a precursor to that is him speaking here. So let's roll this.
There's no upside to just being circumspect and trying to be a nice guy in this environment. This is full on media warfare, information warfare, political warfare, 21st century, like we've never seen before, and coordinated globally.
YouTube has removed the Joe Rogan interviews of doctors Robert Malone and Peter McCullough after the videos racked up millions of views on both YouTube and Spotify.
Now, Dr. Robert Malone is the inventor of the mRNA technology.
Now let's take a look at the former Malaysian Prime Minister and see what are they doing with all of this stuff. What is the actual end goal? And just to see what they have to say. Right?
Are we still in COVID, or this is?
So this is moving into a synopsis, the New World Order stuff from 2015.
Okay.
So.
Malaysia's former Prime Minister, Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, said that the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPPA, is a New World Order strategy by a powerful pact of people led by the US to dominate the world economy. Speaking at the international conference titled New World Order, Recipe for Peace or War, organized by the Perdana Global Peace Foundation, Dr. Mahathir said globalization and borderless trade are being used to establish a one-world government.
Now, let me stop.
Globalist white papers.
Yeah. So you gotta remember, this guy, he's against it, right? So he's trying to bring awareness to this is what they're trying to do with all these different trade agreements that are being signed.
Yeah.
And so this partnership agreement that he's talking about is an offshoot from the Trilateral Commission. And so the Trilateral Commission, again, was established as a roundtable organization by the Rockefellers. And so now he's going to give a breakdown of what they're actually trying to do.
Basically, it is about having a world government. We should abolish all states, all nations, all borders, but instead have only one world government. And that world government is to be by certain people, elites, people who are very rich, very intelligent, very powerful in many ways. They are the ones who will govern the world. There was not much talk about democracy or choice of leaders. Instead, there was to be a government by these elites who will impose their rules on everyone in this world. And for those who are unwilling to submit to them, there will be punishment. And the peace that we will get from this is the peace of the graveyard, because the intention also is to reduce the number of people in this world. At the time when the New World Order was enunciated, the population of this world was only 3 billion. The intention was to reduce it to 1 billion. Now the population of the world is 7 billion.
Now it's 9.
There will be a need
we
to
hit 9
kill
already?
many billions of people, or to starve them to death, or to prevent them from giving birth, in order to reduce the population of this world.
So there we have it from the former Prime Minister of Malaysia. And so, we mentioned before about... they're not only going to reduce the population, but there's always this transitory phase or stage where you still need some human beings to do these small tasks, right? So, now we have Yuval Harari speaking at the World Economic Forum in various places, where he talks about basically the state of serfdom or the peasant class, so called, when most of this stuff comes to fruition.
So this is the human hacker guy, right?
Yeah.
He's the advisor of Klaus Schwab, which we started with the video with. Yeah.
So here's Yuval Harari speaking at the World Economic Forum.
I mean, previously in history, if you were on the wrong side of history, if you didn't understand what was happening and you lost the competition, then you ended up as some kind of serf or manual laborer being exploited by the people who understand and have the power. Now, if you're left behind, you're facing something far worse, which is to be completely irrelevant. They won't even need you as a serf or as a slave.
I like how he says they.
Yeah, they won't even need you as a serf or a slave. When everything comes to fruition, you're really, as he's going to say next, completely useless, and they're going to try to figure out what it is that they should do to you. So,
you know what? It's funny because at certain times when it comes to, let's say, religion or whatever, that's old people that were dumb, that this older generation, they didn't know what, but now all of a sudden we're taking example when it comes to homosexuality. Oh, Greeks did that. Oh wow! Now we're taking from this old dumb Neanderthal people. We're gonna
now all of a sudden they're smart.
Now they're
they're ahead of their time.
Oh wow! Yeah. Oh, so when they did the serve, like if you lose now you. So now we're going back to that, but we don't really need it. We were gonna do that, but we don't really need to do that. Hey, but religion? No. That's just how they used to think. You know?
It's that old time superstition. Yeah. So here he is again speaking, saying, "Well, I'll let him speak for himself."
Problem is more boredom and what to do with them, and how will they find some sense of meaning in life when they are basically meaningless, worthless. My best guess at present is a combination of drugs and computer games as a solution for more. It's already happening in under different titles, different headings. You see more and more people spending more and more time or solving their inner problems with drugs and computer games.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I mean, he's absolutely right. So in this humanist, naturalist, materialist way of looking at the world, this would make total sense, right?
Yeah.
So the end result of this population of humanity would be to plug them into a matrix, right? Video game. So you drug the body, and you stimulate the mind through this type of video gaming.
You know what?
Exercises.
I can see this guy getting in front of his mirror naked and looking at him like he's great and like giving himself compliments. He has like that.
Yeah. So it's good to see all of this stuff, and we can kind of remember. We can kind of like go back here and see. Let me click on.
The first video, or
just to kind of like bring it home, to like reiterate things, because these guys, it's one thing to sit through something like this and hear it, or to get a little piece of it here and there, but after you've gone through and this doesn't serve as kind of like knock down, drag out, home run proof, if anything, right? It's just this is little,
just like a collection of stuff that
so you can fit all of this stuff within this, as we always say, the iconic truth behind historical fiction. There's a stronger, more substantiated way of looking at the world that I think has been hidden from a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so showing them that there is this other side that exists should serve to pique the curiosity, like kind of like the old apologetic of putting the stone in somebody's shoe, and how fast can you run? Like, I'm really fast. Okay, if I put a stone in your shoe and you start running, well, I can't run so fast at that point. So to slow people down, to let them understand that this thing that is happening in the world is real. It is staged. It is controlled. It's contrived. And it's at its core evil. And so from a God, King, Father, Friend standpoint, this is the Antichrist superstructure that's being built. This is how he can wield so much power, as it says in Revelation 13:16. And so making the case for both of these ideas going forward, that both of these narratives, the biblical narrative for end times or eschatology, maps perfectly with what we see happening in the world. And as what we've mentioned, I think, before in the God, King, Father, Friend podcast, prophecy is two-pronged. One is for the unbeliever to say, hey, like, I can tell you what's going to happen before time, so when it comes to pass, it's like God's signature. And then the other prong of it is like to strengthen the faith, the resolve, the fortitude of the actual believer as they go forth and they fight the good fight, as Jesus says, go ye therefore, teach all nations, baptize them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Spirit, and teach them to observe everything that I've taught you. And so, well, that's a daunting task when all of this stuff is, against you, and everybody's thinking about the world a completely different way than how the world actually is. So there's always all of these layers that need to be peeled back to get to where you would think, this stuff would stick.
Yeah, so it's just chipping away, and with their help. So now it's not just us saying it,
they give us all the goodies.
Exactly, So it's kind of like Alex Jones yelling about this, like, islands and all that stuff, and then comes out, like, all of a sudden, it's like, oh yeah, I can. So people are saying, oh, that's impossible. Nobody would do that. Who would do that? And then now it's a reality we live in.
Yep.
So this is just, we we were saying some of this stuff. Hey, there are people.
Yeah.
This is what they do. They have
Yeah.
these plans. This is what they want to do, and all that stuff. Like, you crazy, this and that. But now they're going public with those ideas.
Right, yeah.
In the age of internet and all that stuff too,
Right.
it's good that we get to like gather all this and then put them in some kind of format where we can
Right.
show people too.
Yeah.
It's not just us coming up with stuff, you know. Yeah. Like we'd have nothing better to do, sit here and be
Yeah.
like, oh, what they might do, you know.
What's really fun is to like kind of like, you know, people that read like, let's say you've read like the Harry Potter series and then you watch the movie, right? You know the differences between the two, and so it's one thing to read the biblical text and see things come to fruition. You're like, wow, to see it is a completely different experience. And then for the secular stuff to always be into like, you know, it always looked like there was this grand conspiratorial narrative that was, you know, festering in the background, and to finally see the kind of like the fruition of those things come to be, right?
Yeah.
Because before you would just read them in books, and it was hard to find good footage on these things coming to light. But now there's an overabundance of it, and it takes a long time to kind of like pick the best clips to kind of explain certain ideas, so that you don't just A, lose the audience from the beginning, and B, not have a coherent narrative to be like, this is the sequence of the events and how they take place. This is what they say that they're going to do in the writing form, and here's them bringing it to fruition in like the real world.
Yeah.
And so it gives like a good, I mean, that was the whole idea of like, again, the iconic podcast, the God, King, Father, Friend podcast, and the Civilian podcast. So it's fun.
Yeah,
it's a
it
lot
is
of
very fun. Yeah, and like we said it too. So for like God, King, Father, Friend viewers, it is important. You know, sometimes you think you don't want to be. Who cares? So what?
Right.
You know, I believe in God. You know, I have my Savior. I'm fine, right? But it's important to see this stuff because they're tricking you, right?
Yeah.
And the serpent is very crafty and wise. Yeah. So you don't want to end up participating in something that God doesn't intend you to participate.
Right, yeah.
So
come out from among them, my people,
Yeah.
that you not partake of their
exactly.
plagues.
It's think and act, right? So
Yeah.
you have to know what's happening and you have to act properly too. There are
Right.
things you need to avoid, and it's good to see what's going on so that you don't go to church and sing a song for Lucifer, which again, you know, we have all those footage. So there's like plenty of stuff like that where people think that they're doing good, but it's actually it's not. You know,
and another verse that goes, those that. So there's going to be the great falling away in biblical parlance, right? So people turn away, they apostatize, they abandon the faith, and it says that those that kill you think that they do God's service, right? So they're doing some justice thing for God, and so then you get all the the Jesus statements about people that. Not everybody that says unto me, Lord, Lord, shall be saved, but he that does the will of my Father which is in heaven. Many will say unto me that day, Lord, haven't I? And they're going to have the laundry list. Haven't I done this? Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness.
There's a good video. Maybe we should review that here and then watch that. Remember the video you showed me about the judgment time?
Oh yeah,
that'd be like a good one. Maybe we can review it here under God, King, Father, Friend. Yeah. So and then I guess then for our civilian viewers would be, if you look at some of these people out there with all this power, again, to the point where it's like, what do they want? Money? They print money.
Right,
you want power? Look how much power they have. Now what? They want to just keep it for what? Right?
So they're not doing this for no reason. They have a reason. They're more dedicated to their plan, their purpose, and all that stuff than most religious people are. Right? So because you'll find out that they are extremely religious. Like so, in a part of the whole United Nations, the spiritualized UN is to bring about the Theosophical Society and the revealing of the hierarchy and these. There's I mean, we might as well do a civilian podcast next, I guess, about. How the mystery religion stuff ties in, right? So the divine right of kings to rule, the ancient bloodlines, the secret societies who are the caretakers of the ancient occult rites and rituals, and so that reveals the secret doctrine, and then ideas on like there's some cool stuff around like the Holy Grail. What is that? Because that's seen as like the chalice that Jesus drank from before, or on the Last Supper, but in esoteric thinking. The chalice is the actual earth, and the wine or the blood is the humanity, and so that has certain occult ties to it, and so how all of that stuff plays out, because when you read about it in different genres or different areas, like if you read just if you read in different genres in different areas, you get all these different mixtures of ideas.
Yeah.
And so, and then phrases and statements of prominent people will pop up, and they'll say, the symbols of the wise always become the idols of the of the ignorant and the unlearned, right? So, in that context, you have people are being deliberately misled about a whole bunch of different ideas, and if you're not paying attention, it's easy to be self-deluded or to be deceived about this stuff, because it has long histories, and there are people that are working to make it difficult for you to understand. Because if you understand it, then you may talk bad about it, kind of like you may go against some of the Wokism stuff. But we hold the purse strings. So if you do that, then you're out, right? And if you're out, then you're fending for yourself. You're easily marginalized, and it's easier for us to get rid of you. So. It's just fascinating stuff. It's like.
So, do we have another video you wanted to show before? Because you were looking for something.
I think that's the last one here. We can do like a reiteration type.
Maybe like that first video of him saying we're infiltrating government, just so people can see again.
So him by himself saying
Santa Claus with or Klaus Schwab with his own, using his own mouth, saying what he wants to do. I think so, right?
Yeah. So this is the one that's saying that he's penetrated the governments, right?
Yeah.
What we are very proud of now, the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina, and so on, is that we penetrate the cabinets. So yesterday I was at a reception for Prime Minister Trudeau, and I know that half of this cabinet, or even more, half of this cabinet, are for our actually young global leaders of the World Economic Forum.
Yeah. And so now, when you parry this type of stuff with the stated goals of the United Nations, the Sustainable Development, the ESGs, and then how all the corporations and now all the cities and the states and the governments, everybody's just going along nice and orderly fashion. It's incredible to see that amount of order, right? So I remember one of the God King Father Friend podcasts, we talked about order, right? So you have things go from non-existence to chaos to non-order to order to disorder, and so that kind of bleeds into ideas around what is natural evil versus moral evil. And so we've been left with a world that has some chaos, some order, some non-order, some disorder. And so natural order or natural disorder would be things like, earthquakes and tornadoes, volcanoes, what we call natural evil. But then there's the intentional evil, people that are, purposefully sowing disorder in God's ordered realm. And so, and then the idea is like, how does God solve that problem? And this kind of gets us into like some of the goodies of like the God King Father Friend podcast. But a long Masonic idea has been order ab chaos, and so we went through in one of the previous
chaos, right?
So the order out of chaos. But the first thing was the break apart, solve coagula, dissolve and rebuild. And so as you go down through that list of like, ye shall be as God, solve coagula,
as above, so below.
As above, so below. Order ab chaos, phoenix arising, novus ordo seclarum.
Do as you wish.
Annuit coeptus. The law of the law according to Aleister Crowley. And so that whole string of ideas, that is the kind of like main links in the chain that the rest of this stuff is built on, because this is their chain. They're doing this in effigy to their God, right? So if we bring in like a lot of the stuff from Masonic writings that they're concerned with, like Lucifer, right, or Luciferianism, Satanism is a flavor of that, and so. Yeah, it's a lot of really good stuff to get into. I don't know if we're ever not going to make it into
it's like
this podcast.
2 a.m. for us now, and I think we over almost 2 hours.
Yeah, so not bad, yeah.
So probably we have to chop just a little bit of it, when
yeah.
it comes to the unspeakable pandemic that everybody knows about. But
yeah, so we don't want BlackRock to kick us off of their platform.
We're playing in their sandbox.
Yeah,
unfortunately, the rules are you can't say anything. We can't talk bad about World Health Organization.
Right. That's their baby. Yeah. So I guess stay up to date with everything Iconic. Follow us on all of our social media. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Support us by going to theiconiclabel.com. Purchase a hoodie, hat, and T-shirt.
Yep.
You can also go to patreon.com/the Iconic Podcast and select your level of contribution. All of it's greatly appreciated. We're going to continue to do this regardless.
Yeah.
And hopefully this one was beneficial for somebody who's looking into what's really going on in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's about it. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for watching.